England getting off to a fantastic start on Thursday as they beat San Marino 5-0. In terms of Gareth Southgate's 11 that he's going to name, are you expecting a number of changes for this one?
Yes, without doubt. Albania will be a far more difficult opposition. Tactically, I think Gareth has to decide, and it's a great debate of how strong do you go against weaker teams. Yeah. And I mean that by how attack-minded you go, because there is going to be, and it'll be in the papers, I'm sure, in the next few days, and I can see Danny Murphy's talked about this as well in the Mail, about, when you play weaker teams and when you play stronger teams, which I think is a great point, because when you come up against the elite nations, they cause you so many more problems. So do you go with two holding midfielders? Do you go with, say, Henderson and Declan Rice? But do you then go away from that when you're playing against weaker oppositions? Because England have got a luxury of forwards that you can attacking options that can cause a lot of damage. And I think that's a real valid point, because if one thing where we've been very guilty, certainly we experienced this with Ireland at times, you can ignore the opposition a little bit. And I think England are guilty of that as well, where you go, we'll stay with the same 11. But it doesn't really suit who you're playing against. You have to make slight adjustments to your team.
Of course. You think that would be standard in some ways. But interestingly, of course, when we, as you say, when England do take on, let's say, the elite competition, elite teams, there's often, when you see a lineup, and if there are two holding midfielders in the lineup, that often leads to a lot of negativity, because people are thinking, well, already that's a negative setup, isn't it?
Well, if you're playing, let's take an example. Let's throw a team out there. If you're playing, you could say France, but let's go Belgium. Yeah. Now, centrally, in the centre of your pitch, a lot of threats are going to come from that area. So De Bruyne is going to cause a lot of problems, and Tielemans, if he plays alongside him, which I'm sure he would, there that there's going to be issues from the centre of the pitch. So you want to try and shore that up, make it more difficult for the opposition. Now, if you played France, I would suggest that the area that I'm more worried about is the positions that Mbappe picks up, is wide behind fullbacks. So now do you want to play a 3 where he exploits space, which he would be really dangerous in? Which I think he showed in the last World Cup how dangerous it can be if you leave space in behind fullbacks and he can get behind a centre half. So there's different issues, and weaker teams, you give them respect, but you're ultimately there to take them apart.
Yes.
Any sport.
But that's my point, where a lot of people will see a lineup
you won't take away the very best teams. You won't take them apart. You can cause them problems, but you will not unlock them so easily. Like, obviously San Marino is a bad example, and maybe like we say, today's game is Albania is another issue, because they'll be far better than San Marino, but will they be the level of still being a decent international team? I doubt it very much. But it's a problem that Southgate will have to get right, because if England do go deep in a competition, I expect them to, because they have enough talent to go far, is that selection has to be done, even going back as far as 1966 when England won it. They changed some of their side to suit the opposition. And I've watched a lot of World Cups, and I've seen this numerous times, where teams don't necessarily play the team that got them a last result. I think it's a bad idea. It's about who you're playing and what problems they pose you.
And there's also that element as well of, as I know Gareth Southgate has said this before, about he should be selecting a squad that is based on form, not on previous experience, shall we say. It's also about making sure you pick the players, or let's say maybe omit the players that aren't necessarily doing the business at the moment, and there are other players that can do it. And I'm not saying Harry Kane, and I'm thinking of Harry Kane at the moment, but obviously we know Harry Kane is the captain. He's always going to be the talisman that they look to play. But there are certain times where you do have to think about not playing Harry Kane, perhaps like against San Marino. Yeah. Although Harry Kane probably would have wanted to play against San Marino just to get a goal, as we discussed yesterday, because he hasn't scored for quite a while in the England setup. But it's, again, that kind of thinking as well, making sure that you play the players along the lines of what you've just said, playing the right players at the right time.
Yeah,
ultimately.
Absolutely. If you want to achieve a lot in international football, and England have a squad that a lot of countries would love to have that problem. England are far better than in attacking positions than Spain. And I'd argue Portugal as well. And people go, Ronaldo. But if you look at from Foden to Sterling to Kane, just to name 3,
there's an abundance of talent.
And many, many others. That Sancho you could throw in there. And I just think England have got a great opportunity, but you must utilise them in the right way and play different ways against certain teams. Weaker opposition, go far more aggressive, take them apart, which you can easily do. And I think then stronger opposition, I think they have to be a little bit more careful of being punished, because that's what happens at the top end of the table.